Welcome to the Lenora Williams Show. This is your host, Lenora Williams, your nonprofit guru, working with nonprofits for over 20 years, from startup to build up. And my co-host, Carla Thomas, journalist, community activist, and a nonprofit board member. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, Carla.
Good morning, Lenora. So glad to be back in town.
I know, in my neck of the woods, New York.
That's right. I've come back with a New York state of mind.
Ooh. You know, I was thinking about this. A friend of mine used to always say to me, you know, if you live in another state long enough, you can't keep claiming where you were born. And I thought about that, you know, and I was home. I do call it home, New York. I was home and I saw some of my friends that I grew up with, and it was like I was time warped. I went right back to being 5, 6, 7.
I know that was special.
Teenager, all of that stuff. I just saw myself. And hanging out with them was so cool. I disagree with her. Home is still home, and it still feels and smells like home.
Once a native, always a native.
There you go. So thank you for going to my neck of the woods, although I know the weather was crazy.
Oh, man, I'm so glad to be back in regular weather.
What was the temperature?
Oh, my gosh, it was like the 20s and sometimes the teens.
Ooh.
It hurt to walk across the street.
Ooh.
So I had to bring my animal with me.
Uh-oh.
I had on my fur.
You know what? I have to tell you, I had on fur too.
Okay.
Look, I was going to be warm.
That's the only way to flow in that. I mean, I could have done the cashmere, but I wanted to be safe and not get sick.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
So we want to welcome you to the show today. We're going to do what we normally do, just some nonprofit in the news things that we just want to tell you about and have you be aware of. And then we want to do a segment on just teaching you some things you can learn and do with your nonprofit to help it grow and sustain it. And then we do a last piece, and a wonderful piece on how you can find jobs or internships, not jobs, but internships, and some paying with some nonprofits in the area. So, Carla, with that, you want to get started?
Yes, we've got some great news from nonprofitquarterly.org. The first one has to do with Mid-Iowa Community Action, MICA. They have provided crisis intervention services to 23 community action agencies throughout the United States. The crises in which these agencies found themselves resulted in part from a breakdown of governing board site. So we're here to talk to you about boards behaving badly and some observations from the field.
And you know, this is always something that people always confront me with, and that is, how do we select board members? How do we manage our boards, or how do we work with our boards so that we're in a very good relationship? So this is a good article that helps with that whole questioning.
Absolutely. One example is the board of directors in this organization was incredulous when members of the MICA team began describing to them the dysfunctions of their Head Start program, the reason for intervention, and then conducted those dysfunctions to the inadequacies of the top management team. The board chair threw copies of 2 prior Head Start reviews at the consultants during one tumultuous meeting, asserting that they proved, "We run a pretty good program," which is what the board had been told by the Head Start director and executive director. In fact, the reports constituted a 9-year history of extensive non-compliance and deficiency of which the board had remained blissfully ignorant.
Well, here is a good example of boards. We're taking a board perspective on how do you stay informed. How do you know what you're given is good information? And I think that's why the meeting was so powerful and controversial, because the board had received information that basically said this nonprofit is running well, and the executive director condoned the same thing, or said, you know, yes, we got a great organization.
Totally inaccurate.
So let's talk a little bit more. What else does the article say?
Well,
go ahead.
There's warning signs of boards in trouble. But before we get to that, the board accepted the director's facade of calm reasonableness, of a certain philosophical bent, without independent mechanisms for critically assessing information presented to it. The board did not seek multiple perspectives from which to assess organizational effectiveness and health.
Yeah, and so one of the things I like about this particular article and the Team MICA team is that they actually go through and give us some warning signs of a board in trouble. So why don't we talk about some of those warning signs? Because we just read an article, and it talks about giving the information, going with what you're told, and not delving deeper. So
That's
here they
right.
give a list of warning signs for boards in trouble.
Okay. In the area of human resources, there's difficulty recruiting credible board members. That's crucial.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the financial and organizational performance area, there's chronic, unplanned, or unmanaged deficits.
Yeah, and here they talk about almost 70% of boards that they did this research on, which was about 20. How many nonprofits did they look at? I believe they looked at 23 community action agencies. Community action agencies are nonprofits. So from that's where they're getting this percentage. And they said about 70% have chronic, unplanned, or unmanaged deficits, financial deficits.
Wow. And 78% have difficulty recruiting credible board members.
Yeah, and 83% have persistent failure to meet individual organization performance targets, meaning that you set these performance targets in place and you're not even meeting them.
Wow. And then 87%, they don't have an outside audit or operational review by their funders.
And
That's
here,
interesting.
Isn't that interesting? Because you have all this money coming into your agency, and as a board member, you're assuming that everyone in the agency is going to report out what they're doing with the money correctly. Why would you make that assumption? It's almost like saying you're controlling all of the information and you're going to give us the right information around how well you're controlling the information.
Wow. And then 61%, there's a role confusion between the board and the CEO.
Well, we know that that's true. We both have sat
Yeah, I
in
can
on
see that
boards.
power struggle.
Oh, here's a good one. 83% report that low attendance at board and committee meetings, meaning that the board members don't even show up.
Oh, man.
So, I think these are things that if anyone out there is listening, probably would be shaking their heads. We can't see you shake your head, but you probably would affirm some of the things that are being said here.
Oh, absolutely. I just talked to an executive director a few weeks ago, and she said that of the programs that she put on in the last few years, a lot of the board members don't attend. And she said the problem is that a lot of them don't live in the area. So you have to really carefully pick and choose who your support system is going to be.
And the other thing is just even coming to a board meeting. Here we have 83%. There's a low level of participation and discussion at the meetings. 83% poor meeting management, lack of focus, no agendas, unprepared members.
You have to have an agenda at a board meeting, especially when you have multiple people at the table. You can't get anything done.
It's not only there's been many cases where I've been at a board meeting, and I know that the materials are sent out a week ahead of time, sometimes 2 weeks ahead of time, and no one at the board meeting has read the materials. So really it's the onus of the board member to stay informed.
That is true. When I'm on point, I print out those records before I attend the meeting.
And it makes sense, because then you come with some information and you know what they're talking about.
And it saves a whole lot of time.
But here's a big one, 91%. And this is under the title of decision making. 91% have poor communication with funders and key stakeholders. That means the board has never had any conversations with a funder or a stakeholder and has never invited them to come to a board meeting.
Oh, wow.
That's a large percentage.
That's a big mistake, too.
Yes. Because how do you know what is expected of you if you don't ask?
Right.
And you can't rely just on your executive management team to tell you everything.
It's very important to send thank you notes, and if you have a mixer or an event, it's very important to recognize your funders. especially the ones that aren't necessarily anonymous.
I agree, because you want them to fund you again and again.
And they'll feel like a part of the organization, feel like family.
Oh, look at this, 87% decision deadlock or paralysis.
That sounds like the American government
I think
or Congress.
So we're here to just share that really, if you're a board member, you have responsibilities. Attend the meetings, come informed, read the packets. Know that whatever someone is telling you is not necessarily true. And I said this before in one of our other shows, whatever you expect, you should inspect. Meaning that whatever someone's coming to you with the information and sharing it with you, if it's the executive management team, then you should ask for deeper and deeper analysis, sometimes outside analysis, or sometimes even have an internal compliance control groups, meaning you have a team that's inside of your organization and they're responsible for compliance. And to have that team come report directly to your board so you know what's really going on. And have that be an independent report from the executive director and the executive team. But here's another article where they talk a little bit more about nonprofits behaving badly, and it's in the same genre of the whole board of directors and executive management team.
Yes, the experience of one large urban agency illustrates how the political ghosts of minority empowerment found at the core of some community action agencies overtook the larger anti-poverty mission. In this case, a dynamic African-American executive director was exposed by a local newspaper to have used a company credit card to pay for vacation expenses for her husband, expenses not repaid until the newspaper called attention to them. Big no-no. She had also not paid for the cost of catering her wedding reception from the agency's food service. Oh my goodness. As a result of this publicity, the board refused to renew the executive director's contract, even though it had just given her a positive annual performance evaluation. In the following 3 months of board indecision and contract extensions, the director was indicted by the local prosecutor for 1 misdemeanor and 4 felonies related to financial misconduct. The board became increasingly polarized by these discussions, finally voting not to renew the director's contract and naming a program director as interim director.
Well, here again, we just talked about 87% of the population that they researched said that one of the problems with their boards was decision deadlock or paralysis. And here we're talking about what? Paralysis. Meaning that people are afraid to make decisions. People are afraid to make those hardcore decisions.
Yeah, I saw that recently too.
Would you say I can relate to this?
Yes, I saw a new person on a board ready to make a move, and everybody else wasn't making a move.
Oh, ouch.
And she had to understand that there was some legacy and history to that, to what looked like a no-brainer to her was more complicated, unfortunately.
Well, here's what scares me about this. We just said that this executive director was actually indicted. The next part of this article says, unfortunately, and I do want to highlight the word unfortunately.
Isn't that something?
60 days later, 5 board members passed a motion 5-4 to rehire the former executive director with a salary increase. This is the person that was indicted.
OMG. For you millennials out there, oh my God.
So we want to really emphasize this article. The reason why I bring this article to light is because we really, really need to sit down and rethink as nonprofits how we see our boards, and we need to rethink the power, the unwielding power of the executive director and who checks that individual and where are the checks and balances. Is it the individual, the executive director, who's going to tell you what's going on and you're going to accept that? Or are you going to ask for deeper controls and more reviews, outside reviews, or internal compliance teams? One of the things, too, that this article goes into, and this is not to bore you guys to death, but it talks about things that...
The gap between cognitive ability and the knowledge needed to apply that ability may partially explain this. Why so many nonprofit boards are often little more than a collection of high-powered people engaged in low-level activities. Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, because we invite individuals to be on our boards, and they're really powerful people. But that doesn't mean they understand how to operate within the mission and the value of the organization. We can come together with all of our great ideas and experiences, and we share that passion of that nonprofit, but we don't necessarily know how to make that mission and vision work as a team of board members, how to make and help, not just make it work, but how to be a facilitator in the process.
That's true. Because, many times these high-powered people, when they join a nonprofit board, it's to fill some of those social voids, to really just be a do-gooder. And so they don't necessarily always apply their business skills to the nonprofit, which really should operate as a business.
Thank you.
They treat it like a hobby almost.
Right. And that's the same thing as the executive director, who in most cases, especially with smaller nonprofits, are usually the founders, which means that they come with that good feeling, that passion, that desire to bring about a change by utilizing their nonprofit and the resources that their nonprofit can bring about to the community. However, what's missing, the missing link, is that they came together and created a business. That business is called a corporation.
That's right.
That's why you file the articles of incorporation. That's because you are, in the eyes of the federal government, a corporation. And that corporation, by definition, is a business entity. And it's required that you follow certain mandates for a business. Even though you're a not-for-profit business, the only difference is you're not making a profit, but you are still a business. And you have to act accordingly. And board of directors who come with that business mindset should utilize those resources and those tools as they sit on a board.
Absolutely.
So, we have some more of where...
We've got information here on what you can do if you are a board member. Make sure that you understand your responsibilities under state law and as defined in the bylaws of your nonprofit.
One of the things I have to really share with every listener, the bylaws really tell the board how they should operate. So really, the board should really read annually the bylaws when a new board member comes on the team. They should really understand the bylaws, because those bylaws will actually stand up in a court of law that will say what you did, how you should do it, and how you operate it. And it'll determine whether there was any misconduct on the side of the board.
Okay.
What else does it say?
You want to make sure that you're briefed on the full range of work your organization does, including requiring your staff to present information to you in terms you understand.
I can't tell you how many financial reports are given to board members, and the board members are looking like a deer in the headlights. It's like, what is that? And the detail, and it's really on the side of the executive management team too, because you have to treat every board member as if they know nothing. If I treat them as if they're in grade school, they have no idea of finances, and now here's their time and your time to really explain what's going on through numbers.
That's right. Allow them to hold your hand and walk you through this.
Yes.
Make sure that your board receives and understands assessments of the efficiency and effectiveness of programs your nonprofit administers, whether those assessments are done by staff or by funders.
So usually there's a report that comes out. Usually most nonprofits who are getting government funding, they have to provide either monthly or quarterly reports on how well they're doing. And those reports are not just financial. They want to know how well you're doing with your programs. So those reports should be shared with the board. Because the board, then you know exactly what the funder is asking and what the funder wants to see and what's being said to the funder.
Expect assessments that identify problems to be accompanied by staff plans to correct and eliminate those problems. Follow up to ensure the corrections have been completed.
Here we go again. I know even if you're a small nonprofit, you must think about compliance. And the reason why I say that is because compliance is really not about how well I'm doing legally. It's about all the new laws that are coming out. It's about making sure that every grant you have and all the requirements of those grants are being met. Somebody should be on the team that's their responsibility, even if they have multiple tasks.
That's right.
But one of their tasks is to make sure that there's consistency with what the grant said you were going to do and what you are doing and how you're spending that money. So that's one area of compliance.
Set multi-year and annual agendas of results you want your executive to achieve. Results in terms of how the lives of persons served will be different, how the community will be more responsive to the needs of persons served, and how your organization will be more capable of serving target populations and of collaborating with community partners.
I think that's self-explanatory. We have one more, and that is executive processes.
Yes. Establish processes to find out what roles your community sees in you. Understand clearly the limits of action imposed by funding source grants, contracts, and program regulations. Work to close the gap between the two sets of expectations.
Here, please, I know this is a lot of information, but really think about what we're saying. What we're really saying, in the gist of what we're saying is you really have to be a responsible board member. You have to ask the questions and you have to dig deep to get the answers so that you avoid situations like the example we gave you of the executive director who was paying for things for her personal life and then afterwards trying to repay the company, the nonprofit. But really, someone should have been there with checks and balances. And the board, your requirement as a board is oversight.
Right. And being so dysfunctional that they rehired her.
Yes. And that's a board. Because the board felt like there's a whole passion piece around this is an African American organization. We should have an African American leader. We shouldn't let anybody just tear down the organization. And we should not make people feel as if our executive director was malice in any way. And that is a challenge because that's our heart speaking.
Right.
You know, and we want to share what we came in here for, which is the passion around the African American community. However, go back to what we said before. We're business people first.
Come correct.
Come correct. So we're going to tune out for just a moment and we'll be back. And we're going to enter into this whole thing around what we want to talk about with nonprofits today, things you need to know. So this is our time when we get to teach you some things. And today our topic will be learning terms, financial terms. And what do these financial terms really mean? So, if we take a break for a minute, we'll be back and we'll start off with, we had a session before on this, and we'll start back in some of those terms. We'll review some things we did, and then we'll talk about some new terms as well. So, Carla, are you ready for this?
I'm ready to pick up where we left off, Lenora.
I hope we aired that show. Well, we didn't air that show last week, but we'll air it again. And we'll review as much as we can and catch up on some of the old shows as well.
Power-packed information.
Yay!
Gonna praise him in the morning, gonna praise him in the noonday, gonna bless him and lift up his holy name. Gonna praise him with my voice, praise him in my heart.
go to Facebook, House of Cinderella. I spell Cinderella Cinderella. Also Instagram, House of Cinderella. Stay the course and be blessed.
This is the Real Rick Ross, and you listen to KGM1 Radio, and I'm the Real Rick Ross. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Freeway Ricky.
Thank you for tuning in to KGM1.com. And don't forget, check us out on tpng.biz, where we keep positive media #1.
If you'd like to be a part of TPNG or KGM1 Radio, if you'd like to be a radio personality, then send that to Music Director at KGM1Radio.com. Once again, that's Music Director, MUSICDIR, at KGM1Radio.com. Be a part of the movement.
Trip. Candace and I are heading to Vegas. On a weekday, Candace found a wonderful vacation package on BookingBuddy.com on KPR1. Hotel, airfares, and great deals on car rental. So now we can travel at affordable prices without regretting it later.
They have only Vegas deals?
No, they have vacation deals all around the globe. They have the best prices for airfare, hotel, car cruises, and travel news to keep you informed about your destination.
So that's BookingBuddy.com on KPR1.
You have her to your destination on BookingBuddy.com for all your vacation needs.
This is Lenora Williams, your nonprofit guru of The Lenora Williams Show. You're listening to KGM1Radio.com. Hi, so we're going to continue on boards behaving badly. Observations from the field. I said we were going to go into terms for nonprofits, but I just want to finish this piece because there was another side of this argument, and it's not just with boards, but it's the executive manager and management and what they can do to create a better situation for boards.
That's right. There's a whole lot you can do to be an effective board member. Make sure you understand your responsibilities under state law and as defined in the bylaws of your nonprofit.
And I think as executive managers, we have a list of 4 items that the executive managers can do.
That's right. Recognize that members do not come to your board fully equipped, no matter what their prior community experience may be. Provide each new board member with background on your organization and your board's structure. Continually educate members about the work your organization does. Provide opportunities for members to observe or participate in that work and inform them in terms that support their understanding. And understand that the board has a collective, that is a group, responsibility to the organization's mission and community. One of the board's chief responsibilities is to continually revisit and revitalize that mission in consultation with the community so that it continues to be the standard against which all organizational activity and results are measured.
Thanks, Carla. So I hope you had your pens and pencils out. And if you are listening, please know that we're getting ready to go into our next segment, which is
definitions.
Definitions. So here we want to talk about things you need to know. Financial terms, and what do they mean?
There's a whole lot of financial terms, and I think we're going to begin with assets.
Yes.
Fixed assets?
Fixed assets. But before we begin with assets, one of the things I wanted to do is go over some of the terms we did in another show. We talked a little bit about accrual.
Yes, we did.
We talked about cash systems. We talked about, and that's the nonprofit accounting systems, accrual or cash. We talked about fixed assets and what is depreciation. We went to fixed assets and the full definition of that.
Yes.
Went into depreciation and the full definition of that. And then we talked about the confusion by the term capital in the nonprofit accounting world. What is capital? And what are capital projects? And we defined the size of a capital project, that some are minor capital projects. And we talked about that being anything under $5,000. And we talked about major capital projects, which were usually more than $15,000. We talked about capital improvements and the dollar size of capital improvements. We talked about capital campaigns. What do you need to know about them? And then the term I love, we talked about endowments. What are endowments? How do you use endowments? Why do you even want an endowment? And then lastly, we talked about reserves. Can nonprofits have reserves? And why should they? So we have a whole radio program on that will re-air soon. But we want to pick up from that and talk about some more terms that we have that we haven't reviewed.
Yes, and we'll pick that up with assets.
Now let's talk about assets.
Assets are an item of current or future economic benefit to an organization. For example, cash, short-term investments, accounts receivables, grants receivables, inventories, prepaid expenses, long-term investments, owned buildings, furniture, equipment, and vehicles.
So why are assets important for nonprofits? When a nonprofit is going after new funding, or going to a bank to ask for a line of credit, or trying to establish whether they want to purchase capital items in terms of a building, or refurnish their buildings, do some improvements to the building they're in, there's a list that needs to be created that shows what is the value of your nonprofit. And the value of your nonprofit is defined not just by the money you have in the bank, but the assets you have as well.
And that leads us to liability. Liability is items owed and claims against the organization's assets. For example, accounts payable, accrued salaries and benefits, accrued payroll taxes, deferred revenue, lines of credit, construction loans, short-term payable notes, and all long-term debt.
So here, we've talked about assets. What do you own? What's the value of what you own besides the cash in the bank? But also what's important is, what do you owe? And how much do you owe out? And how is that defined? Well, it's defined by things like you have accounts payable. There's bills you owe. And even though you may have cash in the bank that says $10,000, you owe about $5,000 in bills. That's your accounts payables. And you may not be paying them right now, as in an accrual system, but you at least need to report that you owe them. Like you pay rent every month. You have 12 months of rent to pay. And even though we started the new year in January, your books should reflect 12 months of rent. So if I looked at your cash, I would know that I need to subtract the accrued rent from your cash to say what you have really available to the organization. So that's one example of liabilities. But liabilities are a way of describing what is still owed out in terms of loans, lines of credits that have been used, short-term payable notes, meaning that I've got a loan out there for $1,000 and it's on the books for 2015, but it's payable by the end of the first quarter, January, February, March. By the end of March, I have to pay this $5,000. I can't show that I have $10,000 in the bank and that $10,000 is real cash, because I still have to subtract that $5,000 for what I owe on that short-term loan. So that's an example of liability.
Next we have capital, working capital. Money available for an organization's use in business transactions. Current assets less current liabilities. The amount of liquidity an organization has at its disposal. For an example, unused line of credit and cash available after all the organization's fiscal obligations are met.
So here, this is where we went into assets and liability. We just talked about the liability. So we have to subtract all of that liability from the cash in the bank. And we also have to look at how much cash you may have in receivables. So here's a good example of receivables that would be considered an asset. I have a grant for $300,000, but that grantor is only paying me every month, reimbursing me on a monthly basis. So all I have right now, I'll say $1,200. So all I have in the bank in January is $100. But I can anticipate by the end of the year I'll have $1,200. So that is an asset to me that I can report. And it also is an asset to me that I can report that will be minus my liabilities, but it will also add to the money in the bank, because I can count on that because I have a contract for that and I know it's coming. So that's how I create that working capital. I have to get a pencil and paper. I have to look at how many assets I have that are real. I mean, I have a contract that shows that this is real cash coming in. How many liabilities I have. I mean, how many loans do I have out there? How much can I anticipate in my payroll? I have 10 people on staff. I pay those people $100 a piece. I know that by the end of the year I have to pay out that money. I have to subtract that. And then when I finish with those numbers, on the plus side, my assets, on the minus side, my liabilities, there's going to be a balance. Hopefully there's going to be a balance, right? We want a balance. If there's a balance, then that's what is our working capital. Sometimes there's a negative balance, and that's okay, because sometimes you may have grants that come in January, you may have grants that come in September, you may have grants that are coming in June. All of those may not be received yet. You don't have the actual contract in hand, so you can't list it as accounts receivable. No accounts receivable listed unless you have a contract, a signed contract, because I've seen organizations list them anticipated grants. We don't want to do that. But if you have a contract signed, then that will go towards your assets. So sometimes you may have a negative balance because of where you are in the year, or the government hasn't given you yet the contract. So we know that negative balances can exist, so don't get too uncomfortable when you see that. But the reason why you can get a little uncomfortable and start feeling bad or feeling like we got to go after and do some fundraising is because sometimes those numbers are real. Sometimes you haven't fundraised enough, and it will tell you if you need to let go of staff because you don't have enough to cover that staff. And so now we're going back to being a real business. A real business is not going to operate in the negative. If I'm there as a for-profit business, I see a negative balance, it's time for me to get rid of some people or stop doing something.
It is essential to have these spreadsheets and your bookkeeping accurate.
Yes, I can't
see. Just for this definition alone.
Yes. And that's why we got to go back to really the most essential person in a nonprofit is the finance person, the bookkeeper, the accountant, the CFO. Those are key people, and there should be a watchdog over that too. There should be checks and balances. An executive director really needs to be very knowledgeable of finances. So when you receive those reports, you actually know what you're reading, and you know whether you really have the things that the report is saying. But really, key persons in your organization are your finance people, your bookkeeper, your accounting, and your grant managers.
That's essential. So, that leads us to contingency. Contingency is an amount budgeted to cover unexpected hard costs or soft costs, usually a percentage of total anticipated or actual expenses.
So here's a rule of thumb for nonprofits, and I think it's a good rule of thumb overall. When you write a budget, and you should have an annual budget, please have an annual budget. And when you talk about an annual budget, I'm talking about the budget that contains all of your grants is a composite budget. The word composite means every dollar that you anticipate is in that budget. When you have a composite budget, one of the things you need to put in that budget is at least 5% to 10% of the total revenue you anticipate should be put aside for contingency. Meaning there is nothing is always well defined or well anticipated. Contingency allows you to have some cushion, meaning that you put aside dollars that you know that if something came up unexpected, for example, this person is leaving early, and we didn't really, we said the board voted on vacation, but we didn't really put vacation in the budget for people. We expected that we would fundraise and be able to get to a level of paying people vacation, 2-3 days for vacation. That contingency let's say a person decided they wanted to take their vacation earlier than you were able to fundraise for the vacation pay. Then that contingency can cover you for a small period of time while you do your fundraising. Or out of nowhere, you lost a grant. You didn't anticipate it, you lost the funding, and now you have all these people employed, and you have to lay them off. Well, the grantor only gave you 30-day window to lay off everyone. Sometimes it won't work within that 30-day window. You need to set aside a contingency so that you can anticipate some of those things and be prepared to do something with it.
Wow. And next we have GAAP, GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, a widely accepted set of rules, conventions, standards, and procedures for reporting financial information as established by the Financial Accounting Standards Board.
Okay, GAAP is really important for nonprofits. It is the standard accounting system for all nonprofits. So when you have an auditor come in, if you have grantors that come in and want to do an internal audit of your files, which can happen, if you have the Internal Revenue Service come in and say, I want to see what you did for payroll, if you have any internal audits that you want to conduct yourself to see how well you're doing, there are certain principles that have to be followed and ruled, certain standards. Those standards are set up by this governing board of accountants, and it's called GAAP. Using these generally accepted accounting principles makes an even playing field for every nonprofit. There's a standard used, everybody plays by the same game. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do. So if I look at one of your financial reports here for your nonprofit and I went to $1 million nonprofit, I should see the same kind of financial structure with them that I see with a $10,000 nonprofit. That's what it is, to level the playing field so all of us are using, as nonprofits, the same principles in accounting.
Okay. So that leads us to, you want to discuss earned and contributed income differences?
Sure. Those are important. This is a big deal for a lot of nonprofits. They struggle with understanding what is earned income versus contributed income.
So the definition of earned income is government grants and contracts, or a fee for service, or third-party reimbursements from Medicare, Medi-Cal, and patient fees.
It's also service contracts, interest investment income, rental income, equipment property, and business income. So really the biggest thing about earned income is you have to consider that that money is money that's generated through some type of reimbursement system. So rental income, meaning that I rent this out and I put together a contract, but that means you're going to pay me monthly for what I rented. Yeah. Business income, if I have a business, let's say that my nonprofit sells t-shirts, and I know that that's my business. Our nonprofit gets residual income from our t-shirts. So that means that that income is considered earned income. Why? Because there's something that's allowing you to collect money from it. That's really the most general definition I can give around earned income. And to be clear that you should know the things that we just said. If you had a pen and paper, you should be writing this down. Government grants and contracts that are reimbursed to you, meaning that it's a Head Start program, a HRSA program, Ryan White. If there's a reimbursement for the fees for the services rendered, then those are considered earned income grants. The same thing for Medicare, Medi-Cal, and patient fees. That makes more sense, right? I come in, I get a service, and I'm paying something to you for that service.
Right.
So again, that's income I'm earning.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so the next definition is of contributed income, and that equates to fundraising dollars, pledges, donations, and gifts, planned gift giving like bequests, direct mail, phone banks, membership dues, foundation funds, corporation funds, and church and civic group funds.
So here, these are, so contributed income, you have to really think about it in terms of, these are funds that people would give me. I don't really have to do anything for it. Well, you say fundraising, I had to do something, I had to do a fundraiser. But really, when that person gives you that check for that amount, you didn't really do any service for them. And you didn't anticipate a monthly fee from them. Although this gets a little sketchy when we talk about pledges, because sometimes people can pledge money annually or monthly. But again, you didn't have to do anything for them to make that pledge. They're doing it because they want to contribute to the organization, not because you provided them with a service or a commodity. So the difference there is that people are giving to an organization, meaning a donor who decided, okay, I want to donate $1,000 to your youth group. Or membership dues. When you signed on to be a member of our nonprofit, you knew there were dues. But you say, well, that is a service. No, it's not a service. It's that I signed on to do this. I'm not going to get anything in return for it, but I'm just going to be a member of this organization, which means that I anticipate there's going to be dues. You didn't provide a commodity to me, and the service is there because I said I want to do this. But it's not that you gave me anything. I'm paying it. So contributed income, again, and the things that we listed are key. If you can list these, get your pencil and paper and list these, then you'll always know and have examples of what are contributed income. Fundraising dollars, pledges, donations, gifts, planned gift giving, bequest, direct mails, phone banks, membership dues, foundation funds. All of these things are things, again, that are contributed to your organization without real solicitation and I want to leave the word solicitation, without any service given or commodity sold.
That's some great information, Lenora.
Hope they wrote this down.
Hope you have your pens and papers.
So Carla, this is our segment now. We move to internships.
Oh, there's such great experience to be had through internships.
Yeah, so for all of our listeners, if you haven't listened before, we give 3 parts to our program. First part is nonprofits in the news. Talk about things we've read that we really can share with you, that it will help you understand nonprofits, things you should or should not do. And then the second part is really, it's a teaching session. We're really trying to inform you about a lot of things that nonprofits need to know, whether it's financial terms, or we're talking about new laws that have come about, or 990s, tax information. But those are the segments that we go into in the mid part of this, what is this?
Segment, sure.
And the last part is to talk about ways you can help nonprofits and help yourself through internships.
That's right. And today we've got information from nonprofitexpert.com, and in particular international grant giving for specific areas in the world. And to start off, there's a nonprofit that's helping Asia and East Africa, and it's called the Aga Khan Foundation, akdn.org. And the Aga Khan Foundation is a non-denominational international development agency established by His Highness the Aga Khan in 1967. Whoa.
Yes.
Its mission is to develop and promote creative solutions to problems that impede social development, primarily in Asia and East Africa. It's created as a private nonprofit foundation under Swiss law, and it has branches and independent affiliates in 12 countries. That's a large area.
Yes, and I think we had a segment a week ago, maybe about 3 weeks ago, on international funding and international nonprofits and some of the things that were happening in the world at large that we wanted to share with our audience. So this is really helpful in terms of funding that exists for international nonprofits.
The next one we have is American Himalayan Foundation. That's Himalayan-foundation.org. And it's a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping people of the ecology of the Himalaya.
So let's go into our internship section, because we started talking about ways to get money, but we forgot about interns.
Oh, that's right. Coming at you from idealist.org, one of our
Yes.
favorite websites. So there's a marketing and personal assistant to founder of globalchange.org. It's for a very busy founder of the Global Change Project seeking a marketing personal assistant. This will include doing marketing for various projects and programs, as well as assisting the founder with vital organizational tasks. An internship credit is offered, and the duration is 5 to 10 hours a week. So if you have the time, apply. And we've also got a social media marketing internship through the World Affairs Council Communications Department. They want somebody who's passionate about engaging the public in global issues. And the internship will provide hands-on experience using social media, marketing tools to connect nonprofit constituents, and develop audiences on these social issues.
And there's so many internships, and nonprofits expand the whole globe of businesses. And so if you have a passion for something, really go to idealist.org and really look at some of these. But we're going to name a few more.
Yes, we've got Food-Wise Kids Internship. It's from the Center for Urban Education about Sustainable Agriculture, and it's a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting a sustainable food system through the operation of the Ferry Plaza Farmers Market and its educational programs. Again, that's Food-Wise Kids Internship through the Center for Urban Education about Sustainable Agriculture.
Where are they located?
They're in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
And we have another one in San Francisco, the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, which works to promote bicycling for everyday transportation. They're staying in shape, Lenora.
Hey.
And so this organization is grassroots, and it's one of the largest and most effective advocacy groups in the country. So check out the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition.
Do we have any paid ones on there? Because, sometimes we have some paid internships as well.
Well, I imagine the summer 2015 legal internship with the Environmental Law Foundation, ELF, may pay, and that's in Oakland.
Okay.
And then there's a public relations internship with Alliance for Girls. Anyone seeking PR experience for the winter or spring, apply to all Alliance for Girls, and they're in Oakland.
See, I love this because it's all over the Bay. Go ahead. Well, San Francisco and Oakland so far. That's all we've come to. But usually if you go to idealist.org, you can put where you want to do your internship. And it's not just based in California. You can just put what state and what city you'd like to do an internship in, and you can find your internship.
Okay, and we've also got internships through care2.com. That's in Redwood City. They're looking for interns that want to work on campaign teams and on advocacy issues ranging from human rights to politics.
Wow.
And then there's a marketing internship with Full Circle Fund in San Francisco.
So I think we may have to start closing out.
Yeah.
We only have 1 minute. Carla, you have one more that you want to share?
Sure. Let's see, a social media intern with the Global Footprint Network. If you're interested in communications and social media, this internship is for you.
Okay, Carla. Closing words on today.
It's the start of a new year. There's a lot of great needs in the world. Find a need and fill it, and internships are a great way to do that.
And I'm going back to boards. Please remember what we said, executive managers, boards. Please remember it's so important to do your due diligence.
Handle your business.
Number 4, nonprofits.com. That's corner, number 4, nonprofits.com. Or give me a call at 510-469-6264. That's 510-469-6264. Until next week, when we continue to talk about ways to start, grow, and keep your nonprofit compliant. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for